Hello, everybody, and welcome to
Oh,
the
hi.
Lore You Know. Today, we are talking about the Bleak Savannah and the Kelder Mountains. Neither one was
Kelder
quite
Mountains.
enough, although the Kelder Mountains might have been its own episode, but the Bleak Savannah just isn't quite enough to be its own, so we're going to smoosh it on top of the Kelder Mountains. Before we do
We
that,
didn't
I just
quite,
want to.
yeah. It was like what was left of that region after doing our tour around
Right.
the perforated plains last time. So don't want to
Before
fill
we
the
do
woods
that, I just
anymore.
want to throw out the link for Yugman's Guide to Gelsbad, the collected version, because it is now live on the Drive Through RPG. Currently, it is a advanced PDF, which means you can go and get it and read through it and say, "Hey, you spelled Scarred Lance wrong," or whatever, and send in the suggestions, and then they will finalize that, and you'll get the finalized PDF for free. And I believe you're going to get the cost off of the print on demand as well, is what I read.
And
So
if you bought at least 4
for right,
of the chapters, you should have received a link to get
right,
Yugman's Guide for free.
you should
If
already have it.
you did not get that link, notify them because there was a little kerfuffle.
Yeah, there was a
Um,
tech
there was
kerfuffle.
a software error when they first sent out the link, which messed a lot of things up.
These
So
things
they may
happen.
have gotten them wrong. Yeah, these things happen. And because I used to be a software tester, and these things definitely happen.
Right.
But yeah, oh, what was I saying? Blah, blah, blah. We did talk a little bit about that book last week. It's a great book though. And don't bother submitting the bugs about the page number XX. They know.
They know that one has
They know.
been understood.
That one was deliberate because they're like the pagination is gonna get screwed up anyway as we fix other
Yeah,
errors. So we're saving that. We were saving internal page number to the last minute. Um,
less an error, more of a. We should have told you not to tell us about this because
yeah,
we know.
yeah. As I'm like reporting, you got to exit. Like we know.
Yes.
So
Well, let's dive in.
diving in. So last week we talked about we did the tour around the perforated plains. Kind of ended at the scrub woods in Leon. We did Leone. Feels like years ago, months ago. Now we head to we did Albadia a while ago, and now we head back north to the bleak savannah. This is not as useful as the map you can see in front of you on Twitch right now. I literally have no idea what's happening on Twitch right now, but bleak savannah. My research this week, I did kind of old lore, new lore, side to side kind of things. So and for the most part they're consistent, but there's a few like they changed this. So this area, it's a subarctic region, so in theory it should be really cold. And back in the day it was. It was called the Mercer's Plains, where Permenthes, I can't pronounce anything right, was the father of the Corianic steed. So he was this big magical horse, and his children became the Corianic steeds, which are these magical horses that paladins of Corian can like summon and ride, and they're really badass. You can find them in at least the old creature collection. I think they might be in the new creature collection. Can't recall. So this was the birthplace of those. But other than that, way back in the day, it really wasn't known for being a pleasant area. It was kind of tundric. And then like the terrain changed, and there's no clear idea when. It was well before the war though, where that region is warm in ways it shouldn't be. Like it just became kind of a more, I wouldn't say like verdant plain or anything like that, but despite being around latitude wise the same as Albadia and right up against the Stiffened Sea, you'd think it would be like subarctic. It's not. It's actually fairly warm. It's not, you know, Urkruden desert warm, but but for where it's at, it's surprisingly temperate. And it was home to a bunch of basically human tribes. Um, and But there was a whole mess of cities there way back in the day, pre-Leading Empire or through the Leading Empire. And then the war happened and everything went to shit. Um, and then post-war, as people are restructuring, and people are migrating because of the devastation in various regions. So during the war and post-war, a lot of the creatures from the perforated plains who'd survived migrated out because that place was uninhabitable now at this point. And particularly the race of the proud, or the lion centaurs, I talked about them before, migrated east and ended up in the Bleak Savannah. And also the Bleak Savannah was where in the new lore the Manticora ended up. Um, Presumably the Manticora came from the Blood Steppes. A lot of the lore imply that that's where they were originated, but then the new lore is fuzzy on that, and there's some implication that they could have been Bleak Savannah lion maps. So it's a little fuzzy, and whether the proud are supposed to be from the Bleak Savannah or not. Or but there's also always been proud in the eastern plains of Leeds, so again fuzzy. But anyway, now in the Bleak Savannah, you find remnants of some human cities, or people that not so strictly human, but divine racial cities. Um, some tribes, um, proud. Uh, these creatures called the Unitar, who were also kind of came in from various areas and migrated here. And then finally, in the new lore, specifically the Manticora. So that's kind of what you find in this region. It's the Manticore and the Proud consider the land sacred, despite them not being necessarily born there. It's sort of what they align to. And one of the biggest problems happening in this region is it's being fairly rapidly changed into a desert. Like the more as it becomes more and more arid, the land becomes harder and harder. It's kind of like the Sahara Desert as it's growing on Earth. This is sort of an area that's growing further in desert. So all of the people who live there who care about the environment, which is like a lot of them, are trying, despite whatever side they're on, are trying to stop that eventuality, whether through magic or other means. Be like, we don't want this to be a desert. We liked this place. It was home, and it's not bad. So that's kind of where we're at in the new lore. And the old lore gets into more detail, although again, the new lore may contradict some of this later. As I said, in AV2, the Proud were moved here, and the Unitars were already there, and things were kind of messy. And there were these 8 jeweled cities of Kun, most of which were sacked and destroyed during the war. And the convention of and then later sacked again by the Unitars and the Proud. Convention of Eritrea, which happens, in their big famous event that happened post-war. And Amalthea came in because before the Druid War, and they came in and they're like, no, stop killing people. And they kind of prevented a few of the cities from getting completely destroyed, saving the non-Titan spawn races in that region. But then coming toward the Druid War, when those cannibals we talked about before decided to invade the Ganges, one of the alliances they made was with the Unitars. And the Unitars attacked the Ganges from the north while the Druids were attacking from all the other sides. And so starting in AV 82 AV, the Unitars came in, and then they're like, yeah, we'll ally with these other guys. So it was sort of like, that's why the Druid War was almost like a little mini World War in that central area of Gelsbad, because it was just insane. Because everybody came in, and Calastia showed up, and it's like this whole Vesh showed up. Everybody shows up during that, but that was kind of the Unitar side of it, coming in, and eventually they the elves just and the unified allies of the elves just kick their asses to the point where they pretty much kept fighting until there was nobody left to fight. So it almost annihilated the Unitar population. So at today's date, there's very few Unitar left, and Unitars are like single horned Minotaur. Basically, they're like rhino people.
Yeah, they're rhinoceros people. It's also
Rhinoceros
probably
people.
my number one gripe with the naming scheme for all of Scarred Lands, like Unitar. none of it makes sense because it's not a unicorn, it's not a centaur, it's not shaped like any of those things. And unfortunately, we also have unitards in real life, which are those, one pieces that wrestlers wear and stuff. And so unitar is just so awkward all around. I
I know
don't I
people
don't
wearing
support it.
those wrestler outfits.
Right. Yeah, rhino people wearing those. See, that would make sense. So yeah, poor unitards. I'm actually gonna try and get a piece of art up for everyone while you're talking.
Yeah.
So I'll
Yeah,
keep
so
doing that.
these guys are they're not very strong in the region anymore, which left this kind of vacancy for the proud. Which are the lion centaurs I've talked about, and they're interesting because like we talked about the manticora, and they have sort of a face of sort of a furry, in that classic sense, lion, muzzle, humanoid, fingers and toes, and digitigrade legs and all that business. The proud are lion body, human torso like a centaur, but with a lion head like a manticora or a lion. So it's kind of like they stuck human torso in the middle of a lion. Took the head off, stuck a torso and arms in the middle, and then stuck the head back on. So they're really funky looking, but they can like speak and stuff. So their faces are a little bit more human-ish. Um, and they're really wild people. And it's one of the interesting things is like the proud only have infantry. What are they gonna ride, guys? They got four legs. Of course they only have infantry. Arguably, you could say they only have cavalry. I was like really amused by that statement. So, um, so anyway, but the Unitars and the Proud do kind of create this loose alliance of like we're the Titan spawn and we're gonna be here. And then in the new lore, a bunch of the Manticore kind of join the Titan worshipping Manticore as opposed to the redeemed Manticore who are in Leone, which makes no sense because Manticore shouldn't be redeemed in the first place. So it's more like the Manticore that join the Proud are like the unredeemed, but and that the regular Manticore are just regular Manticore because there's nothing for them to have redeemed from because they're not Titan spawn. So go there. I love it. Anyway, so there were these. You've also got these divine races in that region too. The Maktarak, Maktarki, the Ashnosi, and the Kundu. The Kundu is the one they probably talk the most about. They're very uh, warrior-esque, um, uh, kind of traditional barbarian kind of feel. Not like the Albadians, they're like the winter Viking barbarians, but these kind of are just more like tribal barbarians. And they have this pretty awesome city, and they're known for their military prowess. Um, they're all a third of them are always mobilized, kind of a thing. They're badass fighters. Um, we've got there are these tall, bronze-skinned humans. Um, mentioned that's the Kundu. The Ashnosi are nomadic sand running humans, and there's this lore mentioned talking about the sand runners in several places. I found multiple references to no, I didn't find multiple references to the sand runners. I found one reference to the sand runners, and I went, "Who the hell are these people?" And couldn't find anything else. But that was like two references to the sand runners. And apparently they're the Ashnosi, and they are big on music. Lots of bards types and musicians amongst them, and the warriors sing to each other as they go into battle. So, and I thought of that in terms of the new lore as the Manticora have a bard college in Leone that these sand runners amongst the Ashnoti human tribes an obvious alliance because they're I don't want to say city's a big say it's a city. It's a very small city. Um, their town is near enough to Leone that I could definitely see an alliance there. It's not necessarily called out explicitly, but some vague mentions of that kind of a thing. And then the third divine race there is the Maktaruk. I can't say this. Maktarque. Maktarki elves. So 2 human tribes and then these elves, who left the Ganges centuries ago, intermixed with the other the human groups that are out there. So a lot of elf-blooded descendants, half humans, half elves, or quarter humans, or whatever. And that's their area. So these kind of the 3 populations that survived the various cities sackings and divine war and all that business. So proud, Manticore, Unitars, 2 human tribes, 1 elven tribe, and then the final group rampaging across the Bleak Savannah is the Horsemen of Vangel, who are just some douchebags, in my opinion, causing trouble for everyone. They don't really care. They're not on the side of the Titan spawns or the humans. They're divine worshipping, but they're worshipping Vangel, and they just like running around killing and sacking people, sacking towns and killing people. As like this horde that mucks about. There's also a group of them in the plains of Lead, but this group is specifically vicious as they are led by Vangel's page, Harak. Great name for him. And pretty much a lot of the reasons why various groups in the Bleak Savannah work together is to defend themselves from these guys. so, and climate-wise, as I was saying, it's really interesting because you'd think it would be cold given how north it is, but it's mysteriously not. But it's got a good cross of weather where freezing winds will come in from the north, will come in from the ocean, from the mountains, but then this warmer weather comes up, and it's never like desert hot, but it's warmer than certainly than you would expect. Lots of shifting weather where it'll be like 80 degrees and then an hour later it'll be 30 degrees because Fahrenheit, because just wacky weather. So they talked about how the various tribes wear clothing that are conducive to extreme changes in weather, where they have these big heavy robes and put this belt around them, and then as they get warm they just sort of flip them off, and it just sort of lies down like a long skirt at their waist. This is just like too hot, take the coat off. So they muck about on horseback, like, too hot, oh, it's getting cold, put it back on. As the weather changes dramatically across these plains, there's nothing really to prevent these winds from ripping through. So it's kind of cool there. um uh because of the differences in culture throughout all these different groups vying for this relatively small area, there's a variety of how they enforce crime and how they deal with religion and all of this stuff. So there's a lot of conflict there. As places to live in Skarn, this is not a happy one. There's way worse places, but this is sort of in the middle. Um, uh, so there. And the big, it's in. They also say it's like the divine war in stasis, because you've got followers of Hrunruk, the Titan of, but the barbarian and hunting, amongst the proud, and then you've got and the unredeemed Manticore, and then you've got the followers of Vengel, as I said, the horsemen, and then you've got followers of Tanel and Corian, because this is also sacred ground to Corian because of those horses I mentioned. So it's like a mini divine war is happening across these just unhappy plains. So so and yet you still see these cultural things kind of exchanging amongst the people there. Because despite the fact that there's these kind of mini skirmishes constantly happening, um, there's also a cross-cultural thing where, like, um, during the festival of life that happens during the spring equinox, people wear colorful clothing, and you'll see people doing that both of the human groups and the proud will be wearing like colorful clothing during the equinox. So it's like this universal feeding, despite the fact that they're always kind of fighting. So I thought that was neat. It's like that's a nice little cultural thing. Okay, anything else about the Bleak Savannah? Otherwise, I'll move on.
I think
There's more,
that's
but
Yeah,
They
I
don't
mean
want to spend time.
it's kind of it's a large space that has stuff going on, but it's not nearly as fleshed out as
Yeah,
other
not
locations.
not nearly.
Yeah,
Um, Lots of little things, but it's weird because there's not. I never went there in my games because there really isn't a lot of reason to because of it's kind of isolated from other places. So anyway, moving north from the Bleak Savannah, we're gonna kind of do a travel down the northern Kelder Mountains. So first stop is Krakadoom. Krakadoom. We were just debating before this on how do you pronounce it.
yeah.
Um,
They've removed the umlaut over the O for fifth edition, which makes a lot of sense because there aren't any German speakers in that area of Gelsbad. Maybe in
I
other
know.
areas, I don't know, but
Well, the dwarves didn't originate from this region either. The dwarves
that's
who lived
fair.
there.
Yeah.
So Krakadoom is a city of dwarves living under one mountain called the Mountain of Krakadoom. Um, Ruled by a council of justices. It is a totalitarian critarchy. A term that I had not seen until the new fifth edition book. Basically, a rule of judges. So you would think Hedrag, you would think Hedrad or Hadrada or very lawful thing, but no, these folks are not followers of Hadrada. They are not very religious at all. They call themselves the Forsaken Dwarves. So we've got the Forsaken Elves, who are like, our god died and we're sad and cursed and can't have babies. We live in Termana. These are the Forsaken Dwarves. Not the same as the Charduni dwarves, the dark dwarves of Termana who worship Chardun and come and, conquer. These are just sad dwarves. They're not a unique race. They're just uniquely depressed. So before the Divine War, the history of these guys is fun. Before the Divine War, there was this dwarf called Josephus Tamor, and he just was a dwarf from the Gascar Peaks, way to the west. And there's a bunch of we've mentioned dwarves live there before. He lived there, and he gets this vision one day of Denev, the Earth Mother Titan, saying to him, "Son of the Earth, blood of my blood, I want you to gather as many dwarves as you can and go find my magical city that I have set aside for you. So, and I will take care of you to prepare for the day will you will need to take care of me because something bad is going to happen soon and I will need someone to take care of me." And he's like, "Well, shit, Denev gave me a quest." So he goes off and starts proselytizing and going to various dwarves and saying, "Come with me. We're going to go find this magical hidden city in the mountains." And they're like, "Well, no, you're nuts." And pretty much he's just this weird wandering dwarf doing this and not having much success in gathering followers. Maybe, a handful, but not many. And then the Divine War started. And then a bunch of dwarves were like, maybe this guy is onto something. This is sucky. Okay, sure, we'll follow you. And he manages to round up a crap ton of dwarves. And this could actually explain why so many dwarves left the Gascar Peaks because they left. The dwarves of Burak Torn were like, "You're nuts. We are not following you." But a bunch of other dwarves do follow him across Gelspad to the Keldar Mountains. The like greatest peak in the Keldar Mountains is apparently where this lost city is. Um, and they start, going through the mountains, and it's just stocky, like Titan spawn everywhere, and their numbers are just getting decimated as dwarves are falling from cliffs and avalanches and monster attacks and starvation and all of these things are just just destroying everything for the dwarves as they're trying to reach the tallest mountain in the Keldars. And they get and meanwhile Joseph is writing this journal during the whole trip, like, this is this is how many died today, kind of a thing. And the journal is found in these mountains later. Apparently he dropped it before they arrived at their destination. And like the last page in this like unhappy scrawl says, "The promise was empty, we are forsaken." Like they're like, Denev didn't help us cross these mountains. screw her. But they do make it to the tallest mountain in the Keldars, which is Krakadom. And there's no city there. And they're like, the hell, there's no city here. Where's the promised city of the dwarves that's going to be? I guess we're gonna have to build it. And so they settle there because at this point they, are wretched and starving and feeling miserable. So they settled there like we found it. Guess this is where we're gonna be. And but they're just this absolutely miserably depressed people and very angry and very somber. And they've basically just lifted a middle finger to all of the gods and all of the titans, and they're just like, screw you all. This is where we are now. If you dare come to our kingdom, we will kill you. And anyone who shows up on their doorstep, they basically either chase off or capture, torture, and throw off a cliff or something. And because they do not want any outside anyone's, certainly not proselytizers, to ever show up on their doorstep. Um, the new lore says that while no one goes there, there are some dwarves who come from there who are technically allowed to return. But so you could conceivably play a dwarf from this region and be like, home sucked, so I left to go find a better life. um, but in general, no one else can go there. So if that would be an interesting plot to try. We're going to try to break into Krakadom and create a trade agreement. Good luck, guys. There's A, they don't have anything valuable, and B, they don't want you. Um, and they don't really have much valuable. It's like a sad life. They do have mines, as most dwarves would have, but there isn't anything unique in this mountain that is different than what you'd find in other regions, like Keldars. Um, uh, they are very militant, very heavy military organization. Just about everybody's trained. New and old lore contradict a little bit in terms of what they're all in one mountain. They both say that, but the old lore is like it's all under the mountain. There's this like spiral staircase that you go in down to the mines and up to like the habitation areas, but everything's underground except for like this one main entrance that goes into the mountain, and then there's like kind of little entrances throughout the mountaintop peak. New lore says they've built these balconies and things to grow crops outside on. These open air gardens and orchards on the side of the mountain. And I was like, that's weird. Because,
It's not
like,
something sad dwarves would do.
exactly, it didn't feel like a sad dwarf thing to me. Also,
Right.
it would be really cold. So I'm like, what kind of trees can grow up at the top of
Yeah. I mean, they could
Mount
grow
Everest?
pine trees, coniferous stuff, but
Yeah.
what are they going to do with it?
Yeah. I mean, it's not Mount Everest
They
size,
could
but
do
it's
it for the
still like,
wood.
yeah, but still, like, from my perspective, I think it would be about the size of Mount Rainier here in Washington State. So
It's
things don't grow
chilly.
near the top of that.
Right.
Yeah, yeah. So I was like, okay, open air balconies and gardens, I get, but it just didn't feel like. And
Actually,
Eldor was
if
like,
nothing actually grows, it makes sense. Like they made these, they spent all this time
oh,
constructing it, and then they're like, "We're going to build a garden," and nothing grows, and yeah, it's like a continuation of their sadness.
yeah, yeah, because otherwise they're like, we eat like these crappy mushrooms that grow underground, and that's our main diet, And I'm like, that kind of fit the whole depressed dwarves thing to me.
Right.
And like everything is super simple with them. Um, and like their whole message is life is pain. Afterlife is oblivion or torture in the hands of the evil gods and titans, and that's like their whole existence. So like if anyone commits a crime, they're just killed. It's just the worst place to live. Um so yeah, I kind of doubted that. Um they talk about in the middle of this whole thing is this great grand central chamber where they go to um kind of where everybody goes to gather at certain times. They don't have any religious festivals because they don't have any religion there, but they would go there and like debate things, or this is where, if we captured some ranger in the mountains and we brought him here and we're gonna beat him up and kill him, everybody gets to watch, in this big central chamber. And then it'd just be sad there together.
Hey, but while the Ranger's getting beat up, they get to enjoy his sadness and pain rather than their own. So they're like,
True. True.
yeah.
So
Whew.
anyway, culture of sad dwarves. The Cracodome. And if anybody PCs from there, they have wizards, they have somber bards, obviously any fighter class, no clerics, no paladins, no druids. Nobody religious. And I have no idea how rangers get their magic because they don't pray. So yeah, it's just kind of sad. All right. Should anything else about Cracodome? Moving on, as we head beyond Cracodome to the east, we find ourselves at the mysterious location called Gestgenest, both a person and a place. Just at the north end of the uh, Spine Forest sits a series of towers and a mysterious laboratory called Gestgenest, where the mighty sage slash super wizard built this little fortress place. Um, this is like the dungeon of dungeons. It's like, want to send your PC somewhere crazy? This is the spot. Um, he's got this mad laboratory and a whole bunch of rings of towers. It was built in between 3432 and 3485 OC. Those numbers mean nothing to most of you, but to give a comparison, Divine War was from 3466 to 3529. So it was built like in the beginning of like started to be built. Divine War started while it was being built. It got finished during the Divine War, and this was like almost 200 years ago. So, and Gesgenest is this super redonkulously powerful wizard, and who was a expert in engineering and fabrication, known for making golems and weird mechanical devices that have magical properties, and known as like an arcanist.
And it's kind of a testament to his abilities that he built it during the Divine War because most shit was just getting leveled, especially, I mean, it's not quite in like major battlefield areas, but still.
But he also didn't participate in the war.
He just hid over there and was like, okay,
he just hid over there.
Block goes there.
Exactly. But he did have a whole crap ton of apprentices. So it wasn't like just him in the mountains
right.
going, I'm gonna magically make these towers. It was like he had a whole bunch of guys helping him, various apprentices and scribes and whatnot. So he wasn't alone up there.
You gotta imagine they're all like, you realize the stars just fell, right? And he's like, shut up, put that over there.
Exactly. Exactly. I can totally picture that. Yes.
Yeah.
And what gets me though is after the war, or sometime toward the end of the war, the place was effectively abandoned. All of the apprentices who survived left. Everybody left the whole place, and it's been abandoned for 150 plus years. Is Gesgenest still alive? He'd be about 300 years old if he is, which is certainly possible because wizards can do funky things.
And does it say what he was? Was he a human or?
It's the implication.
Implication that he's human. Gotcha.
But in the kind of the same way that Yugman is implied to be human. So, and in terms of power scale, we put him right next to Yugman in terms of, and Yugman's clearly like 400 or 500 plus years old at least, because he's been around forever. So is Gesgenest still alive? Unclear. But at some point, all of his people left. And this lab is amazing. Like ever since then, people have like adventurers have been showing up. A Verduck of Calastia sent in an expedition going to find out what's in there, see if there's cool stuff, bring it back to Calastia. As you do. And no one has actually explored the entire thing, and very few people have gotten far. Outside of the whole region is this fence. This is like a half a mile out from the complex, and it's this big wooden fence with various gates, and there's signs repeated like on every post that says the laboratory and residence of Guest Genest. Admittance by invitation only. Trespassers will be removed. Many thanks, Guest Genest.
See, he's already nicer than Yugman.
Yes, and it's Gest. So it's not. There's no. Yeah, Genest. Ganest. So that's the first thing you encounter is this this fence. And then half a mile in, there's this ring of the outer ring of towers. Originally, there were 12 towers in the outer ring. Now there's only 8 because some fell due to adventurers coming in or monsters or weather. It's not clear. But clearly, no one is upkeeping this place intentionally. They haven't been rebuilt. But these outer towers are the most accessible things, most explored. And these were all the towers where his various minions basically did the majority of the work. He had this whole mess of scribes who lived in these towers, and the towers are only 2 stories tall. So are they really towers? Just more like outbuildings, but they're round like a tower. So round buildings. First story is the workshops, and the second story is the living quarters. Um, and and they're not super big either because they're about as wide as they are tall. So pretty small. Think about it. It's like it's only 2 stories. That doesn't sound very big. But he had all these scribes working in there, basically writing stuff down. And what he did was he gathered lore from across the continent, across the planet, and would bring it to these scribes, have them copy it, and then return it to whoever it was. So he'd be like, "Can I borrow your book for a month? You know, part of the book, copy this 7 times. Okay, now." So he was gathering all of his crazy amounts of lore, mostly on engineering stuff, and magic, arcane stuff. And the other thing he would do is, as he was doing his own work and his own experiments and his own creations and his workshops, he would talk out loud and describe what he was doing and have this kind of magical radio to several of the scribes who would be writing down everything he said. So, which I loved this. It's like, so I'm fixing this bolt, and he says, I'm fixing this bolt, as the scribes are like writing everything down. So there's these extensive journals of what he was working on at any one point in time that these scribes were writing. So imagine like all writers cramp, and they were just,
Right.
I write
You
for
know,
an
these
hour.
scribes then ran away and started their own IKEA stores or something. They're just
Yeah. Oh,
like,
definitely.
we figured it all out,
Yeah.
and we're gonna sell meatballs.
Yeah. I love IKEA meatballs. They're so good. And the cookies. Um. So anyway, those are the kind of the outer towers, and as I said, those have pretty much been explored. They're mostly accessible, not a lot of traps or anything. Then one ring in, about 200 yards in from these outer ring, is what are known as the Tower Constructicus. Totally a made up word. And this is where the construction work happens. Because I said he's an engineer, he's an architect. He builds weird shit. And this is where the builds would happen. And they were not clear how many towers there. Not my notes doesn't say how many towers there were, but another ring of towers, and between these sets of towers, there is a searing wind or a bunch of searing wind creatures. You find them in the creature collection. They're sort of an elemental that uses swords. So if you like go
Yeah.
in that area and you look from a distance, you just see like on the ground a bunch of edged weapons, like every polearm imaginable and every sword imaginable, and be like, that's not suspicious. And then if you get too close, the weapons just fly up in the air and try to attack you, but not
Right.
in a magic weapon attack, but in a I'm being carried by an elemental windstorm attack. um, so there's this is protecting that area. So good luck getting past that, because they're really hard to fight. In so much as elementals with lots of edged weapons are hard to fight. And then you get to these towers, and each tower has some connection to a different extraplanar realm, although it's not clear which realm which tower connects to. 4 of these towers still stand, and they're like nigh impossible to get into. They all have visible doors, but there's no handle, there's no keyhole, there's no latch, there's no rivets, framework, hinges, anything. It's just a cutout. I have got so many flashbacks to like various D&D classic modules when it comes to this whole thing. Like,
Yeah.
I, uh, I can't remember all the names, but like I've run some classic stuff. You know, the missing towers of so and so, and in the Rise of Tiamat, there's this tower that was abandoned by a wizard that the bad guy cultists have moved into. It that feels like one of these towers.
Yeah.
It's just got that vibe. um, so this is such a classic D&D trope of like try and get into the evil wizard's tower, except it's not just one, and it's not necessarily evil, but it's not just one tower. There's like a whole crap ton of them. So these 4 of remaining of these towers, um, and one of the doors that adventuring parties had tried to get into, specifically the expedition that Verduk had sent. They were like, "Oh, we think we can get into this tower," and they tried to get past the door, and the door turned into a golem. Turned out it was a golem, and it just sort of and it's like a fake wall, and it just turns around and attacks the shit out of them, and they finally defeat it, but the people drop, and it's just a really rough fight. They retreat back to the one of the outer towers to rest and recover. They heal up. They go back to try to go through the door left behind, and there's like a new golem in its place. And they were just like, screw this. We are not high enough level. They go back to Calastia, and Verduk's like, forget it. This is not worth funding.
They went before they realized what respawning was.
Mhm.
Like you kill the one monster, but if you have to go rest, it's going to be back when you go there. So,
Well, it's not it new one because they could still see the rubble of the old golem, but like a
right?
new golem grew. It's like, wow. And various adventurers tried like we'll try dimension door, we'll try teleport, we'll try scrying, we'll try clairvoyance. None of those spells work. Like anybody tries to do anything remotely or interdimensionally, ethereal plane, nothing works to get in, or almost nothing. One group of adventurers find one thing that kind of works badly, but getting to that in a minute. Beyond the Constructicore, what did I call them? The Constructicus towers. There's the inner towers, which is kind of the final ring, uh, 50 yards further in. And these are nine towers are still standing in this final inner ring. And each is again fashioned after a mode of a different extraplanar realm. Again, not clear which tower goes with which realm. Um, and this was the most successful group of adventurers, and so maybe 10 groups of adventurers have made it to the Constructicor. One group of adventurers made it to the inner ring using stone shape, lots and lots of stone shape, to basically drill their way in from underground and up into one of the towers. And then gathered maps and information. And this to me, they didn't specify how, but I just had it in my brain that they would have used the unseen cartography spell, because that's got a range, just like you that way, and just trying to map out as much of this as they possibly could before defenses of the tower beat the shit out of them and they had to retreat. And in that retreat, half of the party were sent to an extra dimensional plane before they escaped. So really dangerous. And no one's mapped this place. So there's Genest's complex is like a premier place to map out for this Thracian vault if you go check this out. It just looks like it would be a lot of fun to send an incredibly high level party through. Because I don't think a mid level party would chance, except maybe in one of those outer rings. Like go to the scribe ring and get me a book. I don't know. So this inner ring, these 9 towers. There's 3 libraries, so cool lore there. 1 tower for alchemy and potions, an observatory, a summoning tower that Genest used to summon elementals, um, and it's guarded by steel beetles because we need fun, creepy construct monsters. And then his tower that he made his own little home, his study and bedroom and whatnot. And then finally, kind of toward the middle, is a tower that's magically disconnected from the others. So presumably Guest had some way of bamfing between the towers that he could do that like no one else could. But in this one tower, incredibly inaccessible by anybody but him, guarded, locked with this thing called the Infinity Lock, which if you detect magic on it, does not detect as magical. But no rogue, i.e., that rogue that was with that one adventure made it this far, could get through it.
I
One
mean,
guy
he
actually
could
tried.
say, "No rogue before me has gotten through this," and no rogue after. So,
He was the only guy who's tried. But
right,
anyway, he couldn't get through it, or she, I don't know.
right.
They could get through it. But Infinity Lock, and but it's not clear how it works. Like they couldn't figure out how it worked, and they couldn't get in this tower. But the one thing they did discover is there's in this tower rumored to be priceless artifacts, a pit fiend, a group of evil jinn, and various wicked entities imprisoned within.
As
So
one
presumably,
tends to keep in their tower.
presumably it's like Ganesh's enemies would send some minion after him, and he would
Yeah.
just vamp him in this tower, like send a pit fiend at me. Are you really going poof in the tower? Oh, Jinn, because there was all these uh, summoners who could summon Jinn from like
Right.
the Empire of Elves and whatnot, and then they show up at his doorstep. No, into the tower. So this tower is like the ultimate dungeon full of monsters and priceless treasure. And I don't know, my brain was just like Tomb of Horrors. Um,
Although they
except
could just be like, you go in there and you're like, "Oh, pit fiend to fight." And he's like, "Will you let me out? Oh my god, I will give you whatever you want if you just let me out. I've been in here for way too long." You know,
yes, and presumably
people, we have people. It's like Beauty and the Beast,
yeah,
except for their
yeah,
demons.
except for their demons. Yeah, presumably all indications is Guest isn't there anymore. And my suspicion is he's probably dead or somewhere else. It's not clear what happened to him.
Yeah.
He completed the towers. He worked there for many moons, and was constant. Not only completed the towers, he was constantly. It sounded like he was constantly working on them. But construction ended at some point during the war, and at some point during the war, all of his apprentices abandoned the place. Most of his apprentices have since died because it's been, pushing 200 years. There's a handful of people who know who still are alive. A couple of elven apprentices who had geas cast on them so that they cannot speak of what they experienced there, voluntarily cast on them, and a dragon, a stormwrack dragon, um, uh, named Akentarian, named Stormwrack dragon, who apparently was a friend or ally or associate or something of Guest, and he knows some stuff about the tower. If you can actually pry information out of a epic level rack dragon, so good luck on that. Um, so just that tiny handful of people who know what this is all about, and they're not really talking. And anyone else who would have known has died. So um, good luck learning all of that business. So that's just nice. One other thing he's known for, um, and I've had many players use this spell, because it's fun, is a spell, 3/5 spell called Ganest's Far Strike. I have not seen a 5e conversion of this yet, unless there's one buried in like one of the Sourcing Vault books I haven't read yet. But it's I don't I haven't I, it's not in Yugman's Guide or any of those books yet. But it was a 3rd level 3/5 spell that does d4 damage per level, and those rule set. So presumably would be upgunned a little bit in the new rule set. But what's cool about it is, it's just like, okay, it's like a flaming thing, right? Well, there's no limit to the range. You just have to see it. So if you can see 6 miles away, not by scrying, it has to be direct line of sight. But if you have like a freaking or
Which is how Magic
glass.
Missile used to work as well. Like, you used to be able,
Yeah,
as long as you could see it, that's how. And now they've like severely limited it. But yeah, you used
yeah.
to be able to sit there with your telescope and be like, pew,
Yeah.
thud, yeah,
So this is like that, except it's a fire instead of
yeah,
force. So it's d4 fire damage or multiple d4 fire damage with no limit restriction.
yeah.
And you can use spells like Clear Sight in Yugman's Guide, or you can use magic items like Eyes of the Eagle to enhance it. If you can enhance your vision, so you can't like be like I scry on you and I make it appear. But if
Right.
you're like, you can't. It's not direct line of sight, but you can't make the spell go through a scrying pool. But see that guy over on that mountaintop, far strike, gonna do 10d4 damage, fire damage to you, buddy. So pretty neat spell, and I've had PCs use it,
Oh yeah.
and I've had bad guys use it too. And they're like, "Why am I on fire? I couldn't even see what attacked me. That
Right.
mountain over there."
It's one of those things where you have to be like, okay, now I have to wait for the second one to hit me, like to follow, like to watch where it's coming from.
Kind of a sense of where they're at. So yeah, really really awesome spell there. We need to convert that.
Yeah.
It's just kind of funky. So it's Guestganest. Um, I someday someone will run an adventure through those towers, possibly me. Okay, moving on. Moving south, we entered the Spine Forest. Um, Not a lot to say about the Spine Forest, but this is kind of how you would get. You probably wouldn't go through the mountains themselves. In the new lore, basically says that the hunting parties from True Drogna, the city of the orcs, and Bridge City, which is the city just to the south of the Spine Forest, go there to hunt game because it is one of the more safe forests in Scarred Lands. After
Would have
probably
like
the
the only
Ganges.
safe forests in Scarred Lands.
The Ganges. This one in the Ganges, pretty much.
Yeah.
A couple of small groves. But yeah, it is the, other safe forest of size. Um, the new lore does say that there have been conflicts there between said orcs and said people from Bridge City, and that there's also a group called the Vagabonds, who in the new lore says it's a group of humans, manticore, and orcs who attempt to capture anyone trespassing through the forest in their region. The old lore goes into more detail. Um, so this forest was once called Denev's Spine. I don't know why they changed it to Spine Forest, but well, I guess the Spine Forest, Denev's Spine Forest would be the full title. Um, Protecting Bridge City from the crap that's in the Plains of Lead. But what is interesting about this forest is that it's unique in that these rare lotus flowers and various narcotic plants grow there. This is they talk about the Ganges being for ganja. No, this is the forest for that, man. There's so much weed in this pine forest.
Yeah, what they don't tell you is like the battles between the orcs and the Bridge City people is actually like drug cartels that are just
It is
trying to
definitely drug cartels,
yeah.
no question. um, is So these vagabonds. There was this captain in the Claston army named Thomas Linden. He was just this guy in the army, and at one point he's just like, I don't want to do this anymore. Stuck his sword in the ground, plops his helmet on top of it, and says like, "Y'all bye," and leaves. Just abandons. And for whatever reason, he manages to leave without people killing him. He leaves the army, and they don't see him for hide of hair for him for 3 years. And the next sighting of him is in the Spine Forest, several thousand miles away, um, where he's basically gathered this group of pacifists. And I kind of think of him as sort of Robin Hood with the merry men, except stoners. Um, and they guard the Spine Forest from intruders and outsiders. So new old lore implies, yeah, you could hunt on the borders, but don't do anything violent, because then the vagabonds will come and kick your ass and kick you out of the woods. And don't touch the weed. If you touch these lotus flowers, they will be very pissed. Meanwhile, there's this other group of guys called that the vagabonds refer to as the Rippers, who aren't necessarily an organized bunch, but they actually are sent in by the drug cartels, folks working for the Scaled or whoever, who go to the Spine Forest to find these lotus flowers to bring them back to their various places and sell them, because this is really good stuff, dude. and and they rip out the plants. Of course, the vagabonds carefully cultivate the plants and make sure that they can grow more and all, because they want they want their weed. The Rippers are just like, I got the whole plan, they give a crap. So there's this mini war going on between the stoners and the the drug dealers. Um, so that's fun. I love that. um, and this is where you get julkaweed, which is basically marijuana. The Scarlands Gelsbad is marijuana, and you hear a lot about it, and as a component in various uh, herbal alchemical things, and like, oh, they're smoking the julkaweed again, or opium. It's the other the lotus flowers would be making opium. So drugs are a thing on the Scarred Lands. So I love that about the Spine Forest. Moving. Oh, and the other thing it's known for is lots of magical creatures live there too, like nymphs and treants and various things, mostly wood forest, uh, the fey forest beasts. So the Spine Forest has few monsters. You're not going to run into a Chul and an Umberhulk, but beware the trees, because go and try to cut down a tree and you find out that it's a living tree and it's going to eat your head. But generally neutral, peaceful, fae is the only creatures you're going to find in this forest in terms of inhabitants. And it's clear that the vagabonds are allied with them and will take care of them as long as. So if you do go in and like, we're going to get lotus flowers, not only will the vagabonds beat you up, but then suddenly a treant will come and bash your head in. Um, so be aware of that little extra. All right. Anything else about the Pine Forest? Otherwise, moving on. So you continue down, and the next place you encounter is Bridges City. This is a fun spot, one of the central locations in Vengeance of the Shunned. Um, this is a relatively new city, built post-war. Um, it is a hereditary monarchy ruled by Queen Watra. Primarily humans and dwarves live here, according to the new lore. Old lore throws in elves and halflings. Um, and its labyrinth of bridges and various structures basically sit between 5 mountains that link them all together. So it's very high up in elevation. And it's a really cleverly engineered city. Um, and they've built buildings within the cliff sides. And there's like networks within the caves, and staircases that are built in the rocks connecting them all, and then these massive bridges that connect them all. They're all magically, enhanced and whatnot. However, during the Blood Monsoon in 129 AV, so not that long ago, one of the quarters of the city was completely destroyed, as like winds and lightning bolts and high rains and whatnot and blood rain came in and just wiped out a basically quarter of the city. Um, and in the 20 years since then, they've slowly been rebuilding it, but that quarter is still pretty much uninhabitable as they slowly um, kind of reconstruct it and reinforce it. But as a result of that, that quarter is now a weakened area, and Titan spawn frequently come in from that region and attack the city because, Titan spawner, no, monstrous Titan spawner, horrible. So there's all of that. As I said, it's a monarchy. There's a little bit of interesting politics here with Bridge City that I liked. The princess, uh, Hanatha, daughter of the queen, is engaged to young King Jaren of Town, which is good 500 miles away, with all of Vesh and Blood Basin between them. So neat. I was like, oh, a royal alliance. Would that mean that Town and Bridge City would be like one kingdom of very separate city states, or I don't know, because Bridge City is considered a city state, as is Town, and both very independent, despite both of them bordering Vash. So I just thought that was like kind of cute, um, like, ooh, princess is gonna get married to the king of that other place. So we didn't talk about Town too much, but that's
Yeah,
it's
we
a
we went
trade.
into fairly deep
Yeah, a little bit, but
stuff
like not.
about it. That was
Yeah, we were talking
way back near the beginning. So
way back. Yeah. Um, so and apparently her engagement ring that the king gave her has some magical property that is supposed to help rebuild that quarter, but it was recently stolen. There's a little quest for you there. There's so many. Have I mentioned that these books are just crammed with billions of quest seeds? Billions of quest seeds. Impossible to run them all. So yeah, Bridge City, hard work is the way of life in Bridge City. Anyone who wants to move in must prove themselves that they are worthy of living there. So it is very much a meritocracy in that sense. And being born there is not guaranteed citizenship. Once you come of age, you have to prove yourself, and if you suck, you get kicked out. So better hope you figured your shit out. Visitors are welcome, and a lot of this is because there's visitors are welcome and treated incredibly well. In the early days of the city, when it was like brand new, there was this just nasty plague that ran through the city, and these pilgrims came, these refugees came to the city going, we need a place to stay. And the city was like, no, we're having a plague. You don't want to come in here. And they're like, no, it'll be okay. And for whatever reason, their sympathy, they let the people in. And it turned out that these refugees were clerics of Madriel, and they were able to cure the plague. Or some kind of minions of Madriel in some way. They were able to cure the plague, and as a result of that, they built a temple to Madriel. They're like, "This is awesome! Thank you, thank you." And the Madriel is now one of the sacred gods, and they anybody who comes into the city, first night's free, basically. The royal family will pay for room and board on your first night of stay in the city for anyone who shows up. So that's kind of cool. Remember that, GM's first night's free in the Bridge City. So I just think that's a neat thing. Uh, they are very lawful in terms of kind of the nth degree. They're one of those places that will be like, you committed a crime, we will use detect lies to figure out what happened. We will use scrying, we will use we will do everything, to find out what happened. Which you don't see a lot. A lot of places don't do that. So I thought that was kind of interesting that they'll go to that realistic fantasy D&D extreme to get the details and what happens, because thing about using detect lies and detect and read thoughts and all of those spells is they can be tricked, by other opposing magics, so they're not foolproof. Um, but it's kind of neat. The army consists of mostly of people who want to become citizens, because honestly, Bridge City is a pretty safe place to live in a relative sense in Skarn. So a lot of people want to migrate there, or move there. But you have to, as I said, you have to prove yourself. So a lot of people prove themselves by joining the army. Kind of Vesh has a similar policy. So the army's not very big. Well, actually no, it's pretty big percentage wise because the overall population isn't very big. So it's like 10% of the population is in the military. It's like 5,000 people are in the military, 50,000 population. So I guess it is pretty considering. So I completely take that back. And it's known. Other thing the city is known for, what famous for, is the Academy of Magic and Engineering. One of the many wizard colleges in Skarn. We get necromancies, we get the Biolectric Vault, we get the Library of Lokiel. This one is specifically where if you're gonna find an engineer who hasn't broken into Guest lab and delved in all his paperwork, is going to be out of Bridge City. And tell me Bridge City hasn't sent a few expeditions only to come back to turn tail. Um, so Academy of Magic and Engineering is here, and students of the academy or anyone in the academy, students, teachers, anyone, are required to defend the city if something happens like a Titan spawn attack. So, and everyone who is at the academy has to spend a year training with the military as a way of defending the city. So, this, if, for all said and done, is pretty well protected. Um, the academy is relatively small though. They have a graduating class of 25 a year, so 25 students a year. So it's a pretty tiny place. But the alumni are known continent-wide of being experts at magic and engineering. So pretty cool there. Um, that's neat. So as I said before, shows up in Vengeance of the Shunned if people pick that up on the Slorasian Vault as one of the key locations, and you actually get to wander around the academy as in one of the early adventures. So kind of fun there. Anything else I should throw in there? There's a lot of other little details, but those are kind of the highlights.
Yeah.
Okay, and there's a river. If you look at the map, it runs through the Keldars, through Bridge City, and then eventually dumps out in Blood Basin. That's the Durek River. For the most part, and that's where they get their water from, and for the most part, pretty safe river. But every once in a while, when the Hornswithe runs backwards, in a really bad way, and runs backwards through Blood Basin, sometimes this river runs backwards too and gets contaminated by the Blood Sea. Combine that with blood monsoon rains, depolluting this river does happen on occasion. So, not always the best water. Going down the river, back into the Kelder Mountains, heading south from Bridge City. It's a really cool little spot called Skykeep Ruins. I love this spot. Used it several times. Way back, not actually that far back, but during that famous blood monsoon that I've mentioned a couple times, in 126 AV, right at the heart of the blood monsoon, or sort of right at the end of the blood monsoon, this flying castle showed up, a la Laputa, or pick your favorite flying castle myth story. Flying castle shows up over eastern Gelsbad. Nobody really knew where it was from, although later on they determined it was probably from Termana. Why it was flying, no one knows. They found one journal, abandoned journal, later that imply just a few things like why it crashed. Apparently, it was being flown by at the time by one of the apprentices because uh, and it had been flying within the blood monsoon storm for a while. And the pilot, the main pilot, was exhausted after being up for like 3 straight days and needed to rest. And so he had one of his apprentices take over, and it was during that shift that the castle collapsed. So don't know what happened, and it was different, but apparently it was just being piloted by somebody who wasn't quite as experienced. Um, and but the one thing is when the castle crashed, it basically collided into Mount Crogain, Croiganne, crashed into the mountain and you know fell and whatnot. Presumably everybody died. But after that happened, the blood monsoon ended and never came back. Well, it hasn't come back in any kind of full force. There's been little blood rains here and there, but nothing to the level. I mean, because this was a monsoon that lasted for on and off for years of just this string of these just horrible storms coming from the Blood Sea, and it hasn't happened since. So was the monsoon sent to destroy a bunch of flying castles? Were the castles sent to stop the blood monsoon? Is there any connection whatsoever? We don't know. But we don't know. All we do know that the blood monsoon didn't really affect Hermana. So what's going on there? But what they've scholars have determined is it was part of a fleet of skyships. And yeah, crashed into this place. It's now basically a crater. Um, lore is not clear if the crater is in a valley or on a plateau. I've seen both. Um, in the old lore, I should say. The new lore just says that a giant fireball erupted when it crashed, and it's not a lot of people have gone there. And that it's possible that either the magic that kept it aloft became corrupt or weakened, caused it to crash. But that the ruins may contain secrets for creating a flying castle. How to do that. So kind of neat. It has probably the most that is said about Skykeep is actually in the module The Serpent in the Fold, which is the first big module of the Serpent and Fora cycle. As there's a mini map that goes into part of the description of the castle, and the PCs go through a small section of Skykeep ruins. Section that was rebuilt by spider eye goblins, because a bunch of Titan spawn, oh good, flying castle, we'll explore and we can live here. And a bunch of Titan spawn moved in to the ruins, and apparently over the intervening years, these spider eye goblins kind of rebuilt a section of it for themselves. So the PCs get to kind of wander through a bit of that before kind of wandering into various caverns created by spider eye goblins and fighting minions of Mormo, because that's the plot of the Serpent and Fora. So yes, you go to Sky. But that only touches on kind of the tiniest bit of that of the ruins. So there's just like a handful of rooms, and I know there's way more to it than that. So lots of potential there as you kind of flying city, and can you make more flying cities? So yeah, anything else about Skykeep?
I mean, there's more, but they're all spoilers for what's inside, so I don't want to go into that.
Yeah, that's the same thing. It's like, they've
Yeah.
already said it's part of the Serpent and Fora, and that's a bit of a spoiler there. So there is more. Yeah, there's some horrible monsters in there.
Yeah, if you want to learn more, get your DM to run that module.
Yeah. So it has some of the kind of most horrifying art I've seen of spider eye goblins.
Yeah, I snagged it to show, and then I'm like, I don't want to show it because that's spoilers.
It's spoilery.
It is spoilery. Yeah.
Like, yeah, it's like spider eye goblins, yay, because those are fun, and they apparently have a home there.
Right?
And I think you're only like level 4 or 5
It's pretty low, yeah.
when you do it. So yeah. Just kind of nuts because you should be way higher level to even just get there. Oh, that's right. And Keeley is protecting you en route because of plot reasons. It's like the only reason a level 4 party even gets this far is because Keeley was helping you.
Right?
They know it's important. Okay. Moving on from Skykeep. So the Kelder Mountains, they serve as both a protection to Northeast Gelspad, protecting Fesh and Mithril and Mullis Town and Hadrad from various horrible things from Western Gelspad. But they also serve as a barrier to trade.
Yeah.
There are not very many ways to get between Northeast Gelspad and the rest of Gelspad.
Right. In fact, there are several points in multiple books where it talks about them being impassable except for certain routes. And like it's really hard to imagine that. What are impassable mountains like? And especially in a world with magic or and I've come to personally view it as they are impassable by trade. Like you can't take your wagon through to get somewhere else to take your goods to sell them. But if you're a bunch of adventurers or climbers or something like that, you can technically climb up to these different places. But when they say impassable, they really mean by general people and by wagon trains, any kind of commerce.
The old lore stipulates there are 2 places you can get through these mountains.
Right.
Iron-Tooth Pass, which is now controlled by Calastia.
Way down.
And basically, if you aren't part of the hegemony, you're not getting through. Or, where we're about to talk about, the Canyon of Souls. New lore adds the Bridge City, which was interesting because I was like, oh, Bridge City actually has a route. But that route connects the Plains of Lead and the Bleak Savannah, which in old lore really are places most people want to go. Particularly Bleak Savannah, because Bleak Savannah was just kind of awful. But with the opening of Leone, the Bridge City does seem to be a bit of a passable route now.
And looking at the map, I almost feel like it might be a river trade. Like that river that comes out of there might be the connection point. But trying to go one direction up the river might be really problematic. Unless you have my favorite water. If you have a boat and you don't have a canteen or a decanter of endless water, you're a slacker. You should just strap a canteen of endless water on the bottom of your boat. It'll take you wherever you need to go.
Personal water slide?
Right?
And not enough water comes out of that in a round, though.
Yeah,
I don't think there would be enough for... You could do a canoe, maybe, but I don't think you could really get anything bigger than a canoe. But I would say the 4th route that I actually leveraged in Vigilant, which was going over Denev's Aquifer and Arwen's Tier, over this lake, kind of in the middle. But that's another dangerous route that's only available certain times of the year, and you still have to navigate up the Any River and all of that business. But the most popular route right now for anyone who isn't part of the Calastian hegemony is the Canyon of Soul, or also known as Ontanazu, which I always say Otanazu, which is wrong.
It is wrong.
I'm pronouncing wrong. It is Ontanazu. Which,
when you look at the map,
you know, if nothing else, this show is making me pronounce Scarland's locations correctly.
When you look at the map, it's a little confusing because it says Ontanazu's right here, and yet Ontanazu is actually right here and right here. There's east and west, and that whole area is kind of its own city-state.
Its own country, really.
Yeah.
Because it's more than just those 2 cities. It's just those 2 cities are the primary populace. But the population is actually, the overall population is about 120,000 people, and the 2 cities only comprise of 55,000 of those. So, it's like only about half the people live in the cities. The new lore says it's Canyonlands of Ontanazu, democratic oligarchy. progressive, possibly, government on Skarn. Ruled by Canyon Master Frem Artone. I just pretend I can pronounce things. Population's primarily humans and dwarves, with some scattering of elves, halflings, and other races, and orcs. And Newlore also says that they primarily worship Denevin and Keeley, which Olor supports. And that just since Calasti took over Irontooth Pass a few decades ago, it has exploded in terms of everything, population, and importance, value, and all of that business. It's just exploded.
A lot of the humans are actually from, they hail from Amalthea as far as their lineage goes. So a lot of them, and we'll talk about Amalthea next week, but a lot of them are, and more native Antanazan is darker skinned. They have like black thick hair, and their like cultural garb is more because of the area they live in rather than anything to do with how it looks. They tend to wear like leathers or whatever that are tight and fitting rather than loose, and they keep their hair short because
Canyon of Souls.
Yeah, the Canyon of Souls that's right there is a terrible place to visit. Not a good vacation spot. And it affects like both ends of that gorge. So real quick, the western Antanazu was really a series of tents and makeshift buildings for the longest time, because they were there on, a lot of the people that lived there were just there for spiritual reasons. They were there on a self-imposed spiritual enlightenment, and once they got done, they would leave.
Yeah, it was like a pilgrimage place.
Yeah.
I just picture that must be full of like monasteries, and if
Yeah.
you're going to be a monk in Gelspad, you might be from West Antanazu.
Absolutely. And a lot of that totally has like the more permanent buildings have been since things have gotten more popular, because people are like, I'm just going to stay here. And the other side of the canyon that has East Antanazu was just a cluster of these tents of merchants that were like, okay, gotta wait for our time to go through while I'm here, like go through the Canyon of Souls. While I'm here, I'm just gonna try and sell stuff. And after this like invasion by the Calastians, they were like, let's just build permanent buildings here. And some of those merchants stayed.
Yeah, so after the Calastians took Irontooth Pass, they moved up through the Bloodsteps and Haggard Hills and attacked Antanazu, Eastern Antanazu specifically, so you couldn't get past to Western, and lost. Like, on all, they shouldn't have lost. Their army was massive. Antanazu didn't have an army.
And it had nothing to do with the Antanazan army either, because they don't have one.
Yeah, but they have a canyon.
Yeah.
And they know how to use it. And they use it to basically fuck with the Calastians.
Yeah.
And the Calastians effectively died of canyon death as they went. The Antanazans retreated into the canyon. Calastians tried to follow them and then would fall from cliffs and get trapped by monks would show up and windwalkers would show up and trick them into endless canyon or into blind canyons and pit traps and whatnot, and kick their ass using the terrain and environment.
Yeah.
And at the point the Calastians were like, peace treaty. And there's
if you will let us out, we will stop invading you.
Yeah.
And the Canyon of Souls is actually kind of a misnomer, because it is like a canyon through the mountain, but it's really a collection of overpasses and underpasses and somewhat safe trails through, and a lot of canyons. There are multiple canyons, and like they're from 800 feet down to 2 miles deep. Some areas they don't even know what's under there, and this place is littered with ruins and then like vaults that bankers, I love this,
I
Antanazan
love this.
bankers have like built vaults in because they know it's deadly. So who the hell's gonna go in there? And so they have these vaults of built into the
Bolts.
canyons themselves.
Yep. I love it. I absolutely love that. Um, we forgot to mention how it was made. And why in Keely and Deneb. Yeah, way back in the day when the gods were still young and not, angry at their parents. Um, Deneb is, well, not Enkile's mother. Enkile decided to make Deneb a gift for Enkile reasons, and made this set of beautiful canyons for her. And like to the point where there's a section where there are like two side by side that look identical, and like I'm going to make them perfect. And Achilles apparently spent a ton of time building this thing that like the humans then discovered and went, what is this? And it wasn't there. And it was like, I know there's this canyon in the middle of the mountains. It used to just be mountains. And then basically in Keely I just picture in Keely as like a little kid playing in a sand, except a god.
Yeah, except for instead of the that little dirt
Oh yeah.
mover,
Yeah, 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 yeah.
they were just like,
Magic.
right,
Yeah.
godly power.
And then it was like, Aunt Deneb, I made you a present. And Deneb was like, thank you.
Yeah, but it's
But
entertaining
she
because
never.
those two are the worshipped. Though that is the religion in
Yeah.
the area, and in
Yeah.
fact, Inkilis kind of thought to be fairly active there as far as
Yes.
coming in and
Definitely.
blessing things. A lot of so after primarily Eastern Atanazi was a bunch of greedy merchants trying to like make a living, and after the Colossians were repelled, the sense of like peace settled over the area, and people started building houses and started like wanting to live there, but it also changed their outlook, and it made them much more like, I'm here for my own betterment. I don't need to rob you, charge you 3 times the PHB prices because you're trying to go through this canyon that's super deadly. And a lot of that is believed to be Inkile's influence. Some cynics
Hanging
are
out with
like,
monks.
yeah, some cynics are like, they're just like euphoric right now at this win. Hey, we defended our homeland, and so this will pass. These people will go back to being greedy assholes. But some people really believe it's Inkili, so I thought that was interesting.
Yeah, yeah. Either that or they've just gotten a lot of the juca weed from Science
Right? Yeah. Maybe somebody threw like a bunch in the water, and so now there's like this just like the water's just spiked enough.
There is an implication that is not uncommon, as the laws say never harm or needlessly offend a fellow citizen, but otherwise everything is legal.
Yeah.
So prostitution and drugs totally fine in
Yeah.
Antanazu. So and people are incredibly groovy there, like all these kind of chill monks and merchants who are not trying to rip you off, which is kind of there is a very set price to go through the canyon. Like it's 50 gold pieces
Right.
per week. You know, not non-negotiable, but also like you could go Windwalker to Windwalker and they'll give you the same price,
Yeah. And
unless
there's a
unless
guild
you're trying to do
that
something weird.
yeah, and there's a guild of windwalkers. So there are people that are trained to take you through this canyon. They know when the winds are going to go through. They know the safer passages, and they know like the ones that don't go down there. That's a really bad area to go to. But it's also
You
said in there that if you are a member of the guild and you try to overcharge somebody, there are repercussions. Like I think like the beginning, like you get fined, but then it's just like you get kicked out of the guild and you are not allowed to do this anymore. So
Yep. So, and if they catch you like doing an illicit guild walking service somewhere in like a back alley,
right,
and punishment for major crimes is we throw you into the canyon.
yeah, that's not a good thing.
not a good thing at all. So yeah, uh, I love
And
that. I love that.
there's two adventures on the Solution Vault that take place in the canyon. Both of them are part of the Adventures of the Sun series, but it's also like an updated version of how nasty the winds are there and like what the winds can cause because if you're out and you are not wearing the stuff that the windwalkers tell you to, it just flays you alive. Like the wind can rip the skin off of your bones. Um, Even wearing like the leathers that they want you to, you still need to go take shelter when the really nasty winds are going on because it'll still, when you can get knocked into that 2 mile deep canyon, that's bad. Rock slides happen. There's all of these terrain hazards that are part of it, and there's monsters in there.
Source of threats in the canyons. I love it. And it's interesting because depending on when you go,
Mm-hmm.
on what time of the year it is,
Right,
it could take. On average, it's a week. But if you go during,
which is 10 days.
which is 10 days.
Yeah.
No, 8 days. 8 days.
Oh, so the average is 10 days.
The average is 10 days. Oh, okay.
Yeah.
The old average was a week. Um, but it goes up. There's 2 months of the year where it could be up to a full month.
Yeah.
Because just the weather, you'd have to stop, wait for the windstorm to die down, and then progress through. And there's 1 month of the year where it can drop to as low as 5 days because
Yeah.
it's is it Enkile's month, one of
Yeah.
Enkile's months.
Enkalot?
And
Is that the day?
yes, I think so. Where it's like, Enkili has blessed us. We can get through it faster.
I feel like the canyon then turns everything's downhill and the wind is at your back, so it just blows you
Yeah.
faster. Right? You're just like, oh, this is nice.
Yeah, honestly, the way I picture things is like, because we know that trade from Vera Trey is going to come here through.
Yeah.
Trade from Vesh, trade from Mithril, trade from Mollistown that's going over land. And what I really imagine is a lot of it will stop at east or west on Tanazu,
Yeah.
sell to the merchants there, who would then carry it through the canyon and sell it on the other side. So it goes through multiple hands. I think
Yeah.
a lot of goods, like the random villagers in Vesh, would just be like, I'm not going through the canyon, but I will sell my wheat and grapes or whatever in eastern Othanazu and then go back to town, and then from there it will make its way through. And I think that's a lot of how the goods get across. That's just my kind of headcanon, but farmers are not going to do this route.
Right. Yeah.
Like, it's yours, you can take it, and that's how the merchants are just kind of permanently there, and they go back and forth through this canyon over and over many times throughout the year, taking the goods and stuff. So because it's really expensive to have high-level teleport spells bring you in,
True.
especially in 5th edition.
I really enjoy it. Near the center of the canyon, there's a very, very deep gorge, probably one of the 2 mile ones. They're not really sure what's at the bottom. And over it is what is called the epitome of hell. The epitome of hell to those afraid of heights. The Featherweb Bridge.
Oh, I love the Featherweb Bridge.
So it's not sheltered from the wind. Like there's nothing blocking the winds that go through there. And so each end of the bridge, which is it's quite large, like as far as the width. I'm trying to remember how far across is it. It takes 10 minutes to get across it. So
to walk across.
Yeah. So imagine that you're on this bridge, and it does have like sides to it. Actually, I have the art. It does have these like kind of web-like structures that come up and has sides, so like you can grab onto things, but it's not
like
buffered. Right. It's not buffered from the wind.
It's magically reinforced, so
right.
It's not gonna like break or shatter or whatever in the middle of a walk. They do inspect it a couple times a year, but it's safe if you're going with a windwalker who goes,
Right.
hold, stop, hold, okay.
Right.
But
Yeah, so that's what I was saying. On either
freaking
end, there's like
terrifying.
this station where the windwalkers are like there to take you across when it's safe.
Yeah. Yeah. In terms of mechanics, it's like a whole bunch of, dexterity checks, or back in the day,
Right,
reflex
to
saves.
not fall off.
But if you go with a windwalker, you get a mega plus on every one of those checks, or balance checks, I guess.
Right.
But if you go without a windwalker, unless you're high level rogue, but there's a second way to get across.
Right, which is so
You're not
entertaining
gonna,
to me.
yeah, because you're not gonna get your wagon on this bridge because it's too wide. So you can maybe get a really, really steady mule, but anything bigger than a kick-ass small mule who's very not terrified of falling, blind happy mule, or a druid who's trained to a mule. But anything short of that, you're gonna need another route because it's just too big, and they would just freeze and not move forward. So they have
this like they
this
call it a
basket.
basket traverse. Yeah, so it's essentially this like, oh, can't think of the word.
It's this fairy basket that's
Yeah.
drawn on enchanted pulleys across the canyon, which is even more terrifying.
Right, and it's not magically like powered or anything like that. So
no. But if you're too scared to walk, you could get blindfolded, tied to this basket. Because the thing about the basket is it's known on occasion to tip.
Yeah, it actually says to walking across on like that super scary bridge is safer.
Safer than taking the basket. And when I've run my players across this Featherwed Bridge a couple times. And I remember when the rogue was like, high level rogue was like, I'm going on my own and make the balance checks, no problem.
Right.
She also had like feather fall or some shit, so she was fine. And there's and then I forget which party member it was, but there was another party member who was who would like heavy armor, couldn't make the roll, and chose to ride in the basket, or maybe they chose because they had gear. I don't remember. There's some reason, and it was just the word. It was like, I think at the other side, I was like, I will never ride the basket again. After the rolls that I made.
There's got to be like emotion sickness check in there somewhere where you're just like, even if you don't tip out, you're just like,
yeah, like I will take the bridge next time. And this is just in a D&D game, it's simulating the effect.
I am really entertained by the art of the featherweb, because the featherweb is in the back and it's this, it's kind of abstract almost looking in the art because it's so far in the distance you can't see it. But there's two windwalkers that are like, okay, come this way. And then in the foreground is this obvious noble royal guy. And he's just like, do I really want to do this? I don't think I really want to do this. Like, the look on his face is just like, I should go home. I should not go this way.
Like, maybe I'll pay that extra 1,000 gold to get a teleport to wherever it is I'm going. Yeah, no, because it's terrifying. So, which I love that little piece of color there. Just to add to that. So yeah, and I admit I kind of stole from a little bit of this when I made the lift into Tobor Gorge for Fenrir. I was pretty inspired by the Canyon of Souls, and it makes sense. There's another cool location, the Twin Canyons.
Yep.
This is in Keely's little fuckery. Two nearly identical side canyons, and windwalkers use it as sort of a stopping point because, like, it's in the middle of a region where there's just no water, so hydration becomes a problem if you don't have one of those ever water things that you were talking about a minute ago. So they tend to duck into one of these canyons because there's like a shelter there and they leave supplies there. But there's two right next to each other on the same side, and one is a place of refuge and one is a place of death.
Yeah.
And don't get them mixed up, because if you go down the wrong one, people don't come back. and they both go in 50 yards, 50 yards, 50 feet, 50 yards in, and then bend. They both bend in the same direction. They're both next to each other. So
They
I'm like,
do. Yeah.
how that works. So, but
Magic.
and it's so loud through the region too, because these huge winds are going through the main canyon that everybody wears like earplugs and stuff. So you can't hear. If the winds are high enough, you can't really see. So you're basically strapped to each other side by side and don't get a canyon run. Safety. Look, we have refuge is a little cave. We can go in there and get some water, or death.
Right.
And everybody's like, depending on which direction you're going, the first one's the safe one, the second one's the safe one. But if they miss it, they're like, we missed the safe one because we missed the turn because it was too much wind, too dark, whatever. It's a fun little make your survival check, kids. All right, you're there. Gamble. Did you pick the right canyon?
Right.
So that's like a crazy little piece of thing. And what is that the other side of the Death Canyon? Why is it a Death Canyon?
Right.
Pretty awful. Anything else there? That's my theory of what's here. There's some other
So
stuff.
there's mentions in the lore about there is a Silurian ruin in the canyon of souls called the Web of Razors. We could do a whole episode on Silurian ruins. Maybe that'll be a future thing, so I'm not going to go into that.
Yeah. And this is one of the entrances of the Penumbral Lords.
Right. And I feel like
their thing.
I feel like the Penumbral stuff, because we're about 10 minutes from the end, so I think we should save.
Yeah.
We could do all the Penumbral stuff as one episode. But yeah, there is a Penumbral Lord lair.
The Penumbral Lord lair is under the Kelder Mountains.
Right.
Kind of. It's weird, and it's fodder for a future episode, but it is absolutely wackadoo area, and one of the entrances is somewhere in the canyon. So there's all sorts of, you think, oh, it's just occasional monsters. No, there's a lot of villains who use this canyon for various nefarious reasons. So lots of reasons to go there and lots of dealios to encounter.
Yeah.
So yeah, there is all of that. So yeah, I think that's a lot.
That is a lot.
That's just the northern half.
Yeah.
Well, we talked about the southern half in the other episode.
It's true.
Next time, left of Gelsbad, we still are going to cover more regions like the Ganges and Amalthea and eventually Vesh. So
yeah,
we have somehow skipped Vesh.
It came into conversation, but we never focused on it. So,
folks,
a near future episode. Any other details to throw out?
There's so many other details I wouldn't even know where to dabble in. Wind gongs. We didn't talk about wind gongs.
Oh yeah, the wind gongs are pretty fun. So each side of the Canyon of Souls in the settlements, they have these things called wind gongs instead of chimes, because they would just be going all the time and it would be so annoying. They have these enormous tubes called wind gongs that they think are like on average it's like 5 to 6 times per week that the wind can push them, and when they are going off, it's a lot of the people who are there for their spiritual beliefs think it's like Inkili blessing or so those are interesting.
We ranked twice today, and Keeley is clearly blessing us today.
Right.
Yeah. So I just thought that was a nice, because there's little pockets of culture.
Mm-hmm.
Like I absolutely love when they're like, here's a new instrument, or here's a new way of clothing, or here's a new thing, and just I think they just did an amazing job of just sprinkling all of this stuff in everywhere. Little pockets.
And I do like how West was so much of they even kind of like use native in a loose way, because no one is really native to Antanazu. The people who really settled it were pilgrims to begin with that were there for a spiritual pilgrimage, and it's only recently that they've really settled in. And they were from Amalthea, so those people that have kind of settled in. Oh, another fun factoid: Antanazu means Windwalker. So I feel like, as we often do in English, people are like, those Antanazu Windwalkers, and you're essentially saying Windwalker Windwalkers,
Windwalkers.
right? So yeah, the people in Western are mostly those humans, although like the Veritarian elves and stuff come in and all that. But the Eastern one, while there were Windwalkers that settled there essentially to take people through the canyon, it's such a melting pot. So many people from all over the place have settled there, and
lots of Vashins.
Yeah. I can just imagine what the culture would be like. I mean, it would be like America, like where you have on this street corner you have somebody selling tacos, and on that street corner somebody selling Cajun food, and it'd be amazing. I'd love that.
Yeah, and they do say that even though they're very spiritual people, and in general, they themselves don't have, their culture is all very, very open to other people's ideas and stuff, as long as follow our rules, don't be a dick. But if you want to bring in your holidays or your style or your music or your food, it is incredibly welcome. We are really interested in learning more, and that's a lot of the Amalthean philosophy, and back in the days of ancient Amalthea. And Amalthea itself is, well, I want to say no more, but almost no more, because that's the remnants of the Druid War. We've talked about that a little bit, but they're more isolated now because of the Druid War, but their culture of this openness and wanting to learn about other peoples is a very Amalthean thing, and they say that the Azus are more Amalthean now than the actual Amaltheans in Amalthea.
Yeah.
Because of that openness to other people, and I do like that, and that Eastern and Antanazu has that vibe.
Yeah.
Of where you.
I feel like they could have renamed it New Amalthea, because it really is like that culture moved and then grown from there. But obviously, like, Amalthea is still kind of a thing, and we'll get to that next week.
Not as sad as the sad dwarves of Krakenum, but still pretty sad.
True. Those poor sad dwarves.
Sad.
Well, why don't you tell us all about... Well, speaking of that book, why don't you tell us all about yourself and that book?
I wrote this book called Vigilant, Through Shadows and Dreams, Book 1. You can find it on the Drive-Thru RPG, Amazon, and Barnes & Noble, and wherever fine ebooks are sold. No, not really, just those 3 places. And on print, I printed them in. As well as Frostlands of Fenrilik and a bunch of other books, all up on Drive-Thru RPG, and you can find more on our website at morelikethisindustries.com. All of those words.
All of those words, but smooshed together to make one word.
Smooshed together.
Yeah.
Into one really, More Like This Industries. 4 big words, or 3 little words and 1 big word.
It's like German. Okay, so I'm Jeremy Hochhalter. I also worked on Frostlands of Fenrilik. I should throw up a link here, since both of us worked on it. Here you go, peeps.
Worked all week on a new Frostlands book that's coming out.
Yeah.
Soonish.
And if you pick up Frostlands, I mean, technically, even if you don't pick up Frostlands, but it helps to pick up Frostlands. You can publish on the Restoration Vault in that campaign setting, so go check that out. I recommend picking up so you're not just like contradicting everything or trying to publish the stuff that's already in the book, but building on the book would be awesome. And again, if you do, drop me a message over on Twitter so I can share that. You can find me on Twitter at WHPubs, here on Twitch at WH Publications, and on Facebook at WH Publications.
Do you have a Patreon or anything like that?
Not yet, but soon.
Okay. I do not. So.
Hashtag soon. TM.
Hashtag soon. Someone did ask me, they said, do you guys have a Patreon? And I was like, I don't, but maybe Jeremy does.
Yeah. It's been, I was going to start it, and then COVID happened, and I was like, I feel weird asking for people for money right now.
Yeah, same. It's
So,
like just buy the books.
yeah,
If you want to support us, buy our books. Check 'em out.
absolutely. Well, until next week, same bat time, same bat channel. Next Friday, 2 p.m. Eastern for the lore you know. And stop by on Monday at, I think it's 3 p.m. Eastern on Travis Legs. Oh, sorry, your
No,
audio cut
we're
out.
taking this week off.
Oh, that's
No
right.
game. Yeah. We're a little week long. Not right, but we're taking this next week's off, so Family Fair will be returning in a week after that.
Yeah, so not this Monday, but the week after that, stop by Plastic
The
Age Plays, which is
Like,
Travis Legg's channel here on Twitch, for our 5 East Guardlands actual play. Thanks for watching, everybody. Good to see ya, and we will see you next time. Bye.